Hi, it's Mike with AskTractorMike.com. I'm sitting on my bush hog today, and bush hog is a brand name. You might call it a brush hog. If you're in the UK, you call it a topper. If you're in Australia, you call it a slasher, a rough cut rotary cutter. And I'm going to talk about 3 practices that you need to do before you put one of these machines in the field. And this is based on the fact that I used to work in a dealership, and I've seen failure to do all 3 of these result in major repair bills. And we want to prevent that. Now, honestly, what you really should do is go get your owner's manual and follow that to a T, and don't listen to some Yahoo on YouTube tell you what to do. But a lot of us don't read that owner's manual, and I'm kind of bad about that too. So if you'll do these 3 things, you'll prevent a lot of issues with rotary cutters. So first off, if you've had your machine parked outside, let's pick it up and move it. And the reason for that is 2 things. Number 1, we want to see if we've got any oil leaks underneath it. And all the grass underneath it will be dead, but there could be a black spot in the middle. If you've got a black spot in the middle, that's an oil leak in the gearbox, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But the other thing you might have under there is a family of critters. And I can tell you from second-hand experience, it didn't happen to me, but it happened to somebody I knew well. They got on their bush hog and they hooked it up and did a little maintenance to it and then fired up the PTO and didn't move it. And there was a family of, I'm not going to say, living underneath it. And the family, the human family of the guy that did this was nearby, and he put a wave of guts. That's all I'm going to say. It was pretty disgusting and pretty traumatic for his kids. So we don't want that to happen. So even if you don't like raccoons or possums or whatever's living under there, let's move that thing. Let's don't do that. So pick it up, move it to level ground for what we're going to do today. So the first thing we're going to do is probably the one part that needs the most attention on a rotary cutter, and that's a PTO shaft, power takeoff shaft. And I'm going to plug lube shuttle. This is a lube shuttle grease gun. Has thread in canisters. I sell it on my website. I'll put a link up here. But I love this. It's so much better than the old plunger style grease gun. When you're done with your grease tube, you just unscrew it, get another grease tube, push up some grease over the top, thread it back in, and you're good to go. I sell it on my website. It's called Lube Shuttle. Now, it does take proprietary tubes to function, but you can get empty tubes and put your own grease in there if you want to. But it's an amazing product. I love it. I love Lube Shuttle's grease. And it's a life changer if you hate maintaining equipment. But we're going to use our lube shuttle to grease the front U-joint. And then the back U-joint. Now I'm really fortunate. This bush hog cutter, and bush hog was thinking when they built this one, has a removable PTO shaft. And if you bought a used cutter, make sure you don't have this feature. On the back is a push release, and you can take a whole PTO shaft off, and I love doing that. I can grease the front and the back of my PTO shaft with it off the machine. Now, a lot of you are going to find that your back grease zerk is darn near impossible to get to. You just want to meet the engineer that designed it and have a talk with them, because they obviously never planned to grease something like this. But there's a lot of them that are real hard to get to. And some people try to cut a hole in the shield, which is not recommended for liability purposes, but it's done to get to it. And sometimes you're almost better off if it's held on with one bolt, take that bolt out, take that whole shaft off, grease it, and put it back on. But it's a PIA to get to that back grease zerk. I get that. I don't know a good solution to the problem. There's some pretty major brands that have that. So grease the front and the back U-joints, and then your shield. If you've got a shield on your machine, I hope you do. If you've got a shield, that rubber shield has a grease zerk on it, or maybe 2, probably 2, it does have 2, and grease both of those. And a lot of people forget those, but that lubricates what's going around inside from the outer shield that stays stationary. So get that. Now we want to go back to our tail wheel, and the tail wheel's got a couple of grease zerks on it. The wheel itself has a grease zerk. Make sure that's got grease in it. And the yoke has a grease zerk in it. Hit both of those. Now, if you've never greased before and you're wondering, how do I know when I've got enough grease? Well, it's when it starts to come out. And usually you'll hear a crackling sound when grease is starting to break some of the older grease and push it out. If you don't hear that crackling sound, keep an eye open for when you see grease coming out. When it starts to come out, you're done. You put enough grease in there. If you don't hear it and you don't see it, sometimes it's on the other side of the wheel, like on your tail wheel. You'll have a big slug of grease that it just makes a mess. But usually you can hear when it's starting to push the older grease out, and that's when you want to stop. Now, the next area of attention is the gearbox. And gearboxes can fail, and they're expensive to replace because most of the time on older machines, the cost of the gearbox may be more than the machine is worth. So we want to take care of our gearbox. So there's 3 ways to check the oil in a gearbox, depending on the brand and the model of the gearbox. One is they'll have a sight plug, and I'm not a real big fan of sight plugs because a lot of times it's hard to see the oil inside. The style I like the best is the dipstick, and that's the way they all ought to be, in my opinion. You just pull the dipstick out and look and see, make sure the oil's at the right level, put it back in, and you're good to go. My bush hog, and most of them, have a chuck plug. It needs an Allen wrench to take it out, and you take it out, and if there's oil in there and you can see it, you're good to go. And if there's not oil in there, you've got a situation. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So if you've got a plug like this one, and it's low on oil, just put oil in really slowly until it starts to trickle out. And most of these machines take 90 weight gear oil, and that's what you want to put in, but check your owner's manual to make sure. Now, the other thing we want to look at is the color of the oil. We've had a ton of rain in my area this year. I mean, we're flooded, literally flooded. And if you're in a humid area or an area that's gotten a lot of rain, you may have milky oil in your gearbox, especially if the machine was stored outside. Now, that means there's water in there because oil and water don't mix. If it's a little milky, I'd probably let it run if it's not too bad. Use your own judgment there. Those gearboxes don't take a lot of lubrication, and a little water in there is not a huge deal, but you get a lot of water in there, and you lose lubrication properties, and I don't know what happens in the winter when you let it set out and it gets really, really cold. It's probably not good. So if there's a lot of water in there, you want to change it. And some gearboxes have a plug on the bottom where you can let that plug out and change the oil. A lot of them do not. You got to suck it out the top. And I'm not so sure I wouldn't rather have one that sucks out the top, because if you've got a plug on the bottom and you remove it, it's hard to get that oil out around the stump jumper. You have to put something in there to catch it, like a little funnel, and then a hose to get it out of there. But kind of a pain to get out. But if you've got really milky oil, it's probably time to change it. Now, a lot of you are going to ask me, I opened up my gearbox and there's no oil in there. Or there's a black substance in there, but it's not oil. Well, somebody's put grease in your gearbox. And that's an old farmer trick. A lot of people do it. There's 2 reasons why you put grease in your gearbox. I've got a buddy whose dad always put grease in his gearbox, never put oil in there. A flowable grease. That will adequately, usually, lubricate the teeth, and it works good. And if you spring a leak in the seal, a lot of times it won't run out. And that's why farmers do it. The other time they do it is if they have a leaking seal and they've checked the price of a gearbox and it's more than the machine is worth, they'll fill that with a flowable grease and it'll stay in there and lubricate the teeth, and the thing may last forever. So that is a trick. If you've got a machine and it's sprung a leak in the gearbox and it's always draining out oil, you might be able to fix it with a flowable grease that you put in that gearbox, and that might do the trick. Now, a couple things about gearboxes. Not having any lubrication at all in there is bad. I would rather have it running low than fill it up if it only is supposed to be filled halfway. I have actually seen more gearboxes fail by being overfilled than underfilled, so be real careful about that. I don't want to say this too loud. My closest neighbor here blew up a gearbox because he filled it all the way up. He inherited the tractor and the cutter from his father-in-law, and he went out and thought it was low and filled it all the way to the top and ran it a few times, and it builds heat, it blows out seals, and it destroys the gearbox, and it was a pretty expensive fix. Most of the time, with gearboxes, and under warranty even, most companies don't provide the parts to fix the gearboxes. They just ship out a new gearbox, and that's really, really expensive. And there's a lot of labor involved. You have a dealer do it because they've got to take the stump jumper off and pull that all apart. So take good care of your gearbox. And if you've got one that you've written off the bush hog because it won't hold oil, try some flowable grease in there. Might extend the life, might last forever. Now, the last thing we're going to look at today, and this is important, is the bolts. There's a lot of vibration on a rotary cutter, and the bolts tend to work loose. So take your breaker bar and some sockets out. Start with the A-frame. Make sure everything's tight on it. But the real critical one is the gearbox. I have seen gearboxes come loose, and they waller out holes and make a mess and a lot of labor to fix. So check your gearbox, make sure those bolts are tight, and your tail wheel, every nut on that, make sure it is tight, because on brush hogs, bush hogs, rotary cutters, and on tractors, while you got that thing out, check the front end loader bolts on your tractor, the drawbar bolts, your wheel bolts, check all of those to make sure everything is tight, because tractors vibrate a lot and they all can work loose bolts. Now, while we're talking about the gearbox, here's another thing that causes failures, and that is something up under the gearbox. So lift your brush hog up with your 3-point, put something under it so it won't fall on you. Blocks, I like to block it up in a couple of places, and get under there, underneath the blade pan, and see if there's anything wrapped around there. And if there is, get it out. I've seen baler twine all gummed up under there, and that plastic twine eventually melts, and it can take the seal out from below and drain all the oil out of your gearbox and burn it up. So make sure there's not anything under there. Also wire. If you've ever run over a barbed wire fence and sucked in a mile of barbed wire, I've never done it, but I saw somebody that borrowed my bush hog one time that did it, and it was a pain to get all of that out of there. You don't want that to happen, but if it's under there, better get it out before it does damage. Now, finally today, I'll talk a little bit about PTO shafts and being able to extend them. Every year about this time, I get emails from folks that can't get their PTO shaft to come out, and that's one of two things. The first one is probably the easiest one, and that is you've got a little rust down in there, and if you've stored your bush hog outside all winter long and the water's run down the shield and gotten into the two halves that come together, and there's a little surface rust, that can make them darn near impossible to get apart. And people say, well, how do I get them apart? Well, if you got the shield on, it's hard to get any penetrant in there. About the best thing you can do is, I hate to tell you this, hook on the PTO shaft to the tractor and don't hook the bush hog up and drive away. And hopefully you're not dragging the bush hog. You don't drag it but an inch or two if you do that, but it might pull that PTO shaft apart. I don't know, it might damage the gearbox. I shudder to tell you to do that, but that's what I would do. If that won't get it, you're looking at two trees and a come-along. And sometimes that can be a big problem if there's much rust down in there. But once you get them apart, lubricate them good before you put them back together. And I think the best tip is take your PTO shaft off at the end of the winter and put it in your garage. Keep it warm and dry over the winter, and then put it on at the start of the year, and then you'll be able to grease everything in the PTO shaft before you put it on. The other thing that causes PTO shafts not to come apart, and this is a fairly common problem in hilly areas. If you've got a ravine and down at the bottom you've got a tight place where you drive down and then all of a sudden you're driving up, when you get to that bottom place, you're putting that PTO shaft in quite a bind. And a lot of times it'll bend the PTO shaft, and then you can't get the two halves apart ever again. And then you're on your way to a PTO shaft repair place to get two halves put back that aren't bent. But what it can do is break the PTO shaft, the stub shaft off your tractor. It can also blow out your gearbox, push everything out the back, or break the shaft off it. So if you're going down a ravine and up, the best thing is back up and down it when you're bush hogging it. If you have to drive through it at an angle. And it'll tell you that in the owner's manual. If you got a new machine and you drive through down and up, when you're right at the bottom, that's putting that PTO shaft in a tremendous bind. And if you break something, that won't be covered under warranty, because I guarantee you it says something about that in your owner's manual. So we don't want that to happen. So I've been in the farm equipment business 30 plus years, and I've seen failures from all of these things. We don't want it to happen to you. If you'll get out and maintain these 3 areas and take care of them, that'll prevent most of the problems that you could encounter later on. Appreciate you watching my videos. I would be honored if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel, and that's real easy to do. Just click the mic face icon and check the bell so you get notified when I post future videos. Here's a link to my website and the Tractor Fun Store with Lube Shuttle for sale. Greatest grease gun ever. Here's another couple of videos you might want to watch. Thanks for watching.